Tuesday, 30th of July, Harnwell here at the helm, Anno Domini 2024. We've got a lot to get through. We've got through a lot this morning. We've got a lot to get through now. Start off quickly then with Congressman Bob Good, who will give us an update on his recount progress. But before that, Congressman Good, good morning, good afternoon, I should say. Congress has broken a week early, right? It's broken for recess a week early. There's still a lot to be doing. I think the Senate right now has its, we had the live feed this morning, drilling down on the so-called lapses in the Secret Service's provision of security for President Trump. Congress, the House of Representatives, however, is breaking for its August recess. How come?
Well, it is an annual scheduled district work period. We go back in August to our district, but the speaker promised when he became speaker back in October, almost a year ago, that we would not have the August district work period if we didn't pass our required 12 spending bills. We've only passed 5 of those bills, so we ought to be in D.C. incentivizing or motivating Congress to do its job. Now, I'll point out, Chuck Schumer and the Senate haven't passed any of the 12 spending bills from the Senate, but we've passed 5 out of the House, but we got 7 more to pass. We should not be taking this district work period, going back to travel our districts for members to campaign or whatever it is that they're doing when we haven't done our job. Not to mention the fact we've got other pressing matters in D.C., from the president's assassination attempt, from the violence in D.C. With Benjamin Netanyahu being here, to other issues that we should be dealing with that are pressing. The Biden president's mental capacity. We ought to be investigating that. There's other matters that we ought to be attending to in Washington instead of going back to our districts.
So another example, Congressman Good, that Speaker No Johnson's word on something hasn't been something that you can take to the bank. Folks, if you were reassured when Speaker No Johnson said that Biden's proposals, changes to the Supreme Court, would be dead on arrival if and when they arrive in the House, if you were assured by those words, you might listen to what Congressman Good was just saying on this instance, and be less assured. Okay, so there's lots of work to be doing, and yet the Speaker has said you can all clear off. That's I think Americans, taxpayers, will be looking at this with a certain degree of cynicism, as always. Congressman Good, can you just tell me what you think about President Biden's proposed changes to the Supreme Court?
Well, I would point out again, we should be this week having the appropriate committees subpoena White House staff, Vice President staff to determine the mental capacity of President Biden. Is he able to continue serving, or is he not capable of serving? That's the reason why he's not the Democrat nominee. And who was covering that up? But here you see President Biden doing what Democrats do. When they lose elections or they lose Supreme Court decisions, they try to change the rules of the game. They try to undermine our institutions. And you see that with what he wants to do to try to pack the Supreme Court or limit the Supreme Court's term, or in other ways undermine these justices, to apply new abilities to try to remove them from the Supreme Court, which we know would only be applied to conservative justices, not liberals. But Speaker Johnson was right in what he said. The president cannot do this without support from Congress. This is dead on arrival in the Republican House. We're obviously not going to make changes to the Supreme Court. And I don't even think he could get it through the Democrat Senate.
Some of these things require constitutional amendment. Some of them might just require legislation. And you say that the president, for those parts which require simple legislation, it's not just, of course, the president needs the cooperation of Congress on this. He'll need the support of the Supreme Court itself. Otherwise, they'll just strike it down as unconstitutional, which, of course, it is.
That's right.
There's no way that one of the 3 branches of government can bind the operational freedom of another branch just like this on the back of its own whim, is there? In fact, what you were saying, Congressman Good, what you were saying is that to come back to what Biden is doing here, and for all the reasons that you mentioned, he is also, I have to say, and I tip my hat to him, he's taking the initiative here and trying to distract attention from his own failings and the failings of his administration and force the Republicans to go on the defensive. And that's something I would wish the Republicans would do a little bit more of themselves.
I do think he'll try over these remaining 5 or 6 months of his term, if he's able to complete his term, to go as far radical as he can with the student loan transfer scheme, trying to force taxpayers to pay for other people's student loans in an effort to buy votes. He'll try to make it look like he'll try to further impede President Trump's ability to secure the border. He will try to make it more difficult for us to fire federal employees come January in the new Trump administration. And you'll see him try to do things like he's trying now with trying to alter the Supreme Court. He's going to go for broke, try to build his legacy if he's able to complete the remaining 5 or 6 months of his term.
And you mentioned the fact that that the possibility that he might not finish his term. A lot of people think that they make the argument that because he wasn't effectively competent to stand again as president, that creates an issue of national security, that he's still in office, still notionally the commander-in-chief. What are you hearing in Congress about the possibility that he might not survive his term in office as president?
Well, we're all watching him be further diminished very rapidly over the recent months. And I mean, he was obviously limited 4 years ago when he had to run the Biden basement strategy, and he struggled even 4 years ago. But we've seen him diminish very quickly over the past year or so. And everybody knows he can't work a full schedule. He can't work a full day. He can't even hardly get through an interview or even prepare remarks. He struggles. He struggles with basic functions of trying to get on and off a stage, trying to remember who he's talking to or who he's talking about. So we know he's limited and he's going in the wrong direction. Obviously, there's no cure for what ails him, apparently. So if he's not capable of continuing to serve or continue to run for office, why is he capable of finishing his term? And who has been covering that up? What did they know and when did they know it? What is the vice president's role in that? How complicit is she in it? Certainly she should know. She's had weekly lunches with the president. She's obviously observed his diminished capacity and his receding in his abilities. And so that's why we ought to have the relevant committees subpoena White House and vice president staffers, major donors, cabinet members who have been with the president, and have them speak to what they knew and when they knew it, and what kind of cover-up might have been going on relative to Biden's abilities as he's been in office these last 3.5 years, and what his abilities are currently.
Congressman Good, it's surprising to me that a president who has so declined. We saw the debate where we've seen the interview so declined in his ability to construct complex thoughts, that he's been able to come out. I say this facetiously, of course, that he's been able to come out with these proposals regarding the Supreme Court's composition. Final question to you before we talk about your news down in the 5th District. Final question to you is. One of his proposals would be to expand the Supreme Court, I think, to 18 justices and give them an 18-year fixed term in office. It strikes me that the consequence of doing that would be to, obviously, of course, that then gives the proposal, the idea of the proposal is to then give each president in a 4-year term the ability to make 2 changes. 2 nominations. But with this constant rolling nominations to the Supreme Court, it strikes me that the first and most important consequence of that is that the court will then become massively more politicized. As the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, right? Someone who probably is the pinnacle of the values that I would hold if I were American, very much supporting of what the Freedom Caucus tries to do. As the chairman of this caucus, tell me something, right? Do you think that at this stage in America's history, what it really needs is to have a massively more politicized Supreme Court and a politicization which will then be constant? It will be like permanent campaigning from both political parties all the time. Is that really what America needs right now?
It certainly is not. And Biden sees himself as a 21st century FDR who tried this 90 years ago. He tried to increase and pack the Supreme Court, and thankfully cooler heads prevailed, and even his own party didn't support him in doing this when he had massive majorities in both the House and the Senate for the Democrats. And I think the Democrats in the Senate, there's some reasonable ones who recognize this would be a terrible thing. But it's what the left does. He's complaining about the political persuasion of the court, and his answer is to try to make the court more political. Could you imagine just every president could just keep adding to the Supreme Court, the unwieldy number that we would have, and how political that would be? So obviously it would do great damage to one of our most sacred institutions. The Supreme Court has tremendous responsibility. There's going to be ebbs and flows historically as the court leans left or the court leans right. But we've got a good system in place. We need to respect that system and continue to follow the current procedure with respect to the Supreme Court, not let him ruin it with his proposals.
Thank you, Congressman. Finally, then, you have some news. You were on the show last week. You did flag up this week as the week that you expected an update, and you have news.
Yes, we have our recount scheduled for Thursday, August 1. It's interesting that my opponent, Senator John McGuire, tried to have it dismissed. He didn't want to let the lawfully provided recount process that Virginia law allows to go forward. He tried to have it dismissed. But we're going to try to just reveal any mistakes or errors, expose any wrongdoing, and get to the truth of that reflects the true intent of the legal, lawful participating voters of the 5th District. And we're hopeful and prayerful that will prevail.
Congressman, you have a lot of support, a lot of love out here in the Warren posse. What can folks do in the next 2 days before August the 1st to support you? I guess, of course, that you're still requiring that this appeal takes funding and donations. What can people do to help out?
Well, yes, at this point, you're exactly right. They can go to bobgoodforcongress.com. It's costing us about $150,000 to fund the recount. So we could certainly use their help if they could chip in a little bit to help fund that recount at bobgoodforcongress.com. We'd be greatly appreciative.
Well, thank you, Congressman. We'll definitely be watching this on Thursday. Let's try and see if we can have you on the show towards the end of the week, if there's Friday, perhaps, if there's any news on that. God bless, good luck, and we'll stay posted. Thank you.
Look forward. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. I think we've got Julie Kelly now on the phone. Julie, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi, yes, great. The line's clear, right? You can hear me?
I can, yes.
Right, you have some news for us, don't you, Julie, today?
Well, I'm just covering the Senate hearing of the new acting director of the Secret Service, Ronald Rowe, and Deputy FBI Director Paul Avate, who are taking questions from Senate Democrats and Republicans on two committees about what happened on July 13th. And I have to say, I didn't think it was possible for anyone to do worse than Secret Service Director Kim Cheadle did last week during the House Oversight Committee hearing, but somehow Ronald Rowe has possibly made the agency look even worse, less transparent in his responses today. Some really, I think, disgraceful behavior on his part and unassuring answers that we will get to the bottom of what really happened.
Julie, we had the live feed in the morning show a few hours ago. We heard Senator Rand Paul questioning the new director. I was wholly, I think Senator Paul tried to do the best he could. I was wholly unconvinced by what in the short 5 minutes that we heard here on the war room, totally unconvinced on a number of different reasons. Firstly, they kept talking about protocol. They kept sort of saying, there were a number of errors and all the rest of it. 1 error, 2 errors are errors. When you're talking about basically every single thing in a long chain going wrong, you have to think, well, you know what? I'm not a conspiracy theorist freak, but there's so much here that went wrong. It's difficult to continue to sustain good faith especially, Julie, when Steve Bannon and Alex Jones several months ago came on both Steve's show and Alex's show and said explicitly there will be an attempt on President Trump's life. So when they come in and say this, give their justifications, and we've seen the replays of this now in the last 10 days. They say this in advance, and it actually happens. And we're sitting here sort of thinking, oh, it was an oversight. It was like a 20-year-old kid. I don't know about you, Julie. You're sitting there sort of following this debate, but there's only so much credulity I have. And for the nth time, when you hear like it was a lone wolf, a crazy kid, you just don't believe it anymore. You know, you sort of say, come on, guys, give me something original, give me a new line. Did you get any sense now? So you're following this there. Did you get any sense, Julie Kelly, of a latent degree of anger on behalf of people who are either asking questions or answering them for what went wrong? Because sort of following the dialogue, the exchange of messages on Getter, people are absolutely furious with what took place in Pennsylvania on the 13th of July. They are absolutely livid and furious. And the segment that we saw there on the live feed, I didn't get any sense of anger, not even at a performance level. What's your take? What did you see? What did you witness?
There were a few senators who expressed anger, and I think the exchange between Senator Josh Hawley and Acting Director Ronald Rowe was very telling. And Hawley was really pressing Rowe to answer why no one has been fired. And Rowe, instead of admitting, that yes, heads should be rolling and we are going to, he does what leaders of law enforcement agencies typically do, which is get indignant over questions, skepticism, concerns about their performance. He and Hawley actually got into a shouting match. Rowe said, no one has been fired yet, including whoever the individual was who was responsible for not putting any agents at the American Glass Research Building. He says they are conducting an internal investigation, But he also said he was not going to put his thumb on the scale of the investigation. He has lost sleep over the past 17 days. This could have been the Texas Book Repository all over again. And he's not going to allow his people to be, what he said, persecuted over the numerous failures from lack of communication. He said that the Secret Service was not on the same network as local and state and county law enforcement. Even though they were notified 30 minutes before Trump took the stage that there was a suspicious individual in the vicinity, they still allowed him to take the stage. And he blew that off, those concerns. He also blew off why he didn't use counter drones and said that they had networking issues all day, including cell service. Well, how did Thomas Crooks fly his drone at 3:50 that afternoon, live streaming at least 11 minutes of footage from around the Butler Farms rally site? But his Secret Service couldn't do it? None of what he said today, in addition to what Tim Cheadle said last week, passes the smell test. In addition to that, Ben, we have the least believable law enforcement agency in the world, the FBI, Director Paul Abate, who goes along with Chris Wray's accusations and claims about domestic violent terrorists are the biggest threat in the country. He is the one who reportedly overrode DC FBI officials who did not want to raid Mar-a-Lago. Paul Abate is the one reportedly who vetoed those concerns and ultimately authorized that armed raid. So we are supposed to trust the FBI. Oh, but he did manage to say, and this will be the headline today, that they allegedly located a social media account they say they think belongs to Crooks that had anti-Semitic, anti-immigration comments on it from 2019, 2020. Now, of course, he was a teenager back then. We're supposed to believe they can't find any other social media footprint except for this all of a sudden. This reeks of cover-up, and this is exactly why, Ben, people think there's something more sinister for what happened on July 13th and just a series of mishaps, mistakes, and miscommunications. And Paula Bates, Chris Wray, Kim Cheadle, and Ronald Rowe have done nothing to disabuse people of feeling like this government that has gone after Donald Trump for the better part of a decade was somehow responsible for at least creating the circumstances for what happened on July 13th, just like they did on January 6th of 2021.
Julie, I'm absolutely convinced that there's more to this than what the official whitewash in real time is producing. You're doing work that, monitoring this. That's so important for this movement of MAGA for the war room. Where can, if as these developments unfold from this panel, where can people go on social media to be kept abreast of the latest?
And thanks so much for having me on. So I'm on Twitter, X, Julie_Kelly2. I do have a big piece up today on Real Clear Investigations that we could have hope of a legitimate inquiry into this by the DHS Inspector General Joseph Kopari, who has been under fire for 2 years by DHS and Secret Service brass for trying to get to the bottom of January 6th and other scandals. So I have a piece at Real Clear Investigations, and then my Substack Declassified with Julie Kelly.
Julie Kelly, thanks very much for coming on the show. We'll catch up again with you soon. God bless.
You too, Ben. Thanks.
Thank you. What if you could have the brightest mind in the war room providing you with financial research every single month? As listeners know, Jim Rickards is our wise man. His unparalleled understanding of the intersection between geopolitics and capital markets is invaluable. Imagine having access to Jim's insights every month. His newsletter, Strategic Intelligence, is a must-read for anyone concerned about the financial future of America and protecting your own wealth. Jim has a knack for making the complex simple. Strategic Intelligence cuts through the noise and delivers actionable financial guidance. And there's more. War Room members also get a free copy of Jim's The New Case for Gold. What makes it even more important is that Jim is not a gold bug. He provides a macro view, helping you understand gold's significance on the global stage. So don't miss out. Sign up now and claim your free book at our exclusive website, rickardswarroom.com. That's rickardswarroom.com. RICKARDS, rickardswarroom.com. Todd Bensman, we were discussing a few hours ago on the show your article. Let me get this here back up. In the Federalist. You have another one. And the one in the Federalist you had was just citing chapter and verse on a fact which is being memory hold in real time, that Kamala Harris was given responsibility for ensuring the security of the southern border. So you've, as Democrats, both in the administration, the Biden administration, and the Harris campaign, try to memory hold that. You've done a service to America in detailing just how that's not the case. She was actually responsible for this crisis and catastrophe on the southern border. You also have another article here, which is on the Center for Immigration Studies, talking about this scheme to declare Latin American migrants to be refugees. Potentially, this is probably more dangerous for the stability and cohesion of America than anything the Democrats have done up until now. Todd, good afternoon to you. Could you just sort of explain a little bit now about the second article you have up about this plan to refugeeize invaders?
Well, remember that the Biden administration, he and all of his chief lieutenants, and her too, are bragging right now about how the number of illegal immigrants illegally crossing the border is down right now. One of the reasons that it's down is that they're hiding the peas under the potatoes, in the sense that they have these other programs to fly them in directly into U.S. airports and to walk them over the land ports of entry to the tune of over 1 million aspiring illegal immigrants, people that would have crossed, that planned to cross. And they're like, wow, this is great. They didn't cross illegally, but they're all still here. Just as many are still in the country, putting weight and burden on American cities and budgets and welfare systems and all of the rest of that. This story that I have out today is about a third rail that has gotten very, very little, if any, media attention, which is that the administration is now down there in Latin America granting refugee status to people who have never gotten it before in record time and flying them in to American airports at U.S. taxpayer-backed expense, at least 20,000. Yes, I can see. I can hear the music.
Todd, we're going to go for a break just for 2 minutes. Hold on, and we'll break this down.
Okay.
Shortly.
All this nonsense, all this spin, they can't handle the truth.
War Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back. Todd Bensman, before the break, we were just talking now about this plan to redesignate illegal invaders as refugees. And the first thing that strikes me is that there might actually be a greater entitlement in terms of what the state provides to bona fide to refugees, people who are classed as refugees, rather than people who just entered the country illegally. So there's that to consider. More substantially, though, is a future Trump administration bound to maintain whatever status the Biden administration gives out in the next 5 months? That is to say, if it reclassifies 1 million, 2 million people, as opposed from being immigrants, illegal immigrants, now to being bona fide refugees, is there any imperative or any obligation on a future Trump administration to recognize that, or can it just undo it with the stroke of a pen and send everybody back?
My understanding is that once the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services stamp approval on a refugee application, it's not legally reversible, not very easily anyway. So all of the thousands that they're stamping with this right now are here permanently on a path to citizenship with access to full welfare benefits, in addition to the travel loan and resettlement aid and assistance, pots and pans, I mean, you name it, everything. They plan to give this out to 50,000 this year before the end of the fiscal year, like through to October. So it's a substantial program. The other two programs that they're bringing them in, the flights program, those are humanitarian parole and the land port, walking them over the land ports, 1 million altogether there. Those are potentially reversible when those run out. They're 2-year-long renewable terms of humanitarian parole. The administration can just cancel that program completely, let the time clock run out, and then work on it from there. Refugee status, not so much. So this is creating what they call facts on the ground.
Okay, so there are two possibilities here. We're going to have Mike Davis a little later on the show to talk about the latest Biden initiative on court packing. It's amusing to me to hear that an administration can, without any constitutional mandate whatsoever, start playing around with the composition of the Supreme Court. That is something they can do. They can do that. Once, however, you give an illegal immigrant a stamped passport and say this person is now a citizen, that you can't touch. That's irrevocable. That is an impermanent ink. That's more permanent than a tattoo, right? So the Constitution, which lays out what the powers of the president, Congress, the Supreme Court. That's malleable. That can be changed. Giving home subsidies, healthcare, education to illegals. Once the stamp goes on, that's untouchable. That's permanent. Interesting to see how these people work. We'll break down the constitutional parts of that later with Mike. But as I see it, Todd Bensman, then there are two possibilities for the future of America. Either basically it is exactly as you fear, and this is totally irrevocable. The most irrevocable thing in American law will be granting citizenship. That can't be touched, and you're just going to have to accept that. And the consequences that will arise out of that, at least, especially considering electoral demographics, that's one thing. The other possibility is that the Trump administration refuses to accept that, no matter what the judge who could get roped in to sign off on this. No matter what a court says, that a future Trump administration refuses to accept it and moves ahead with saying we're sending these people back. End of story. It will be interesting to see which of these two destinies America walks down. What can people do? Right, in the meantime, obviously vote. I say obviously vote. We're talking in the morning show about election integrity, and that's still an issue. Perhaps voting isn't enough. But apart from voting, what can people do to register their anger and to try to provoke the GOP into being slightly more aware of this? This is the first time I've heard of this scheme here in this article, Todd Bensman. What can people do? What can the GOP do? What can Donald Trump do, the Trump campaign, to resist this as much as possible so it doesn't get to the stage where an incoming Trump administration is just presented with a fait accompli?
I mean, for one thing, you're right. This is brand new information, at least framed in the way that I'm framing it, which is they're granting refugee status, precious, coveted refugee status, to tens of thousands of people that have never warranted it, not in decades. The U.S. government reserves that status for actual war refugees. The top recipients of this are, Somalis and Afghanistan and people from Syria and who are like in refugee camps, and it takes 2.5 years to process an application with vetting and everything. They're just handing this stuff out in a month or two down there in Latin America to people who have always been regarded as economic immigrants. And in fact, there's a survey of the recipients of this program. It's called the Safe Mobility Center Initiative, SMI rather. And people don't know about this yet. So read my piece at CIS.org, spread that out to members of Congress, and have them act on it like they did with the flights program or with the land ports program, and legally challenge it even. You could potentially legally challenge some of these. But Trump needs to be aware of this if he cares about the scheme of it, and put a bullseye on it for when he's or if he becomes president. If he doesn't become president, it's pretty guaranteed that all of three of these programs will just be expanded and greased to bring in the most people that they possibly can in that way. That you can't really see. You don't even know what's happening. It takes reporting like this to be able to even draw attention to it. Nobody knew. They announced it, yeah, but they're not really announcing it the way they're using it. They didn't announce it that way. They're just like, hey, there's this great refugee thing. We're revamping the broken refugee program. And we're going to start doing it in Latin America for the first time in 40 years, since the civil wars there, at a huge breakneck pace.
Todd Bensman, I pay tribute to you to getting this story out for us today. Okay, so you had those two articles, you've referenced those. Where do people more generally go to stay in touch with your output, your writings, your commentary, your breaking news, for example, like today on this refugee plan? Where do they go?
Yeah, I don't mean to overwhelm. I'm very prolific at the moment. There's a lot I'm producing. You can find, I work for the Center for Immigration Studies. You can find my work at cis.org. For starters. And then if you want to sign up for my newsletter and get my social media, go to toddbensman.com. All my stuff, my social media is there. Yeah, I'm about to go to the Darien Gap in a few days. You can follow my Twitter, Bensman at Bensman Todd. I'll be producing material as I go in Colombia and then in Panama, coming right up.
Todd Bensman, thanks very much for coming on the show today and keeping us abreast. We'll catch up again with you soon. God bless for now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Mike Davis, good afternoon to you. Look, I want to talk about Biden's court packing initiative. But before we move on to that, I think you heard what we were discussing there with Todd. What can just give me your first response and then we'll talk about the Biden initiative. What can a future Trump administration do? Be imaginative here. What can a future Trump administration do to overturn this initiative on behalf of the Democrats to make citizens out of illegals or refugees out of illegals? Once the stamp goes on the passport, is it really there really nothing that can be done? What can be done if the future Trump administration were serious about sending people back?
That's the biggest problem is that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, the border czar, have imported over 10 million illegal immigrants into our country, and a vast majority of them are fighting age men, unvetted and unvettable. And these fighting age men are from the world's biggest hellholes and trouble spots. And this is a grave danger to our national security. Just wait. If you thought the BLM and Antifa riots were bad in 2020, wait for the Iran-funded Hamas riots with their sleeper cells in America in 2024. And that's why I always tell Republicans, don't wait till election day to vote. To Trump supporters, vote as early as possible. Bank your vote, because you may not have the opportunity to vote on election day. But I would say this about what President Trump has proven that he can do, because he did it before, is he can get these illegal immigrants the hell out of our country. We are a welcoming country. We welcome legal immigrants, people who can come to America and assimilate into American culture and be part of our society and contribute to our society. That's great, but it has to be in controlled numbers. What we don't want is this flood of illegal immigrants coming from all over the world, people who hate America. There are many people, particularly from these Middle Eastern countries, they're not coming here to assimilate. They're coming here to conquer, as we're seeing in Europe right now. So people need to wake the hell up, get smart about this. And that's where President Trump is going to be a game changer. He did this with trade. He did this with immigration, and he's going to fix this.
If Mike Davis, if the Trump administration, the future Trump administration, is serious about sending millions of people back to their countries of origin, where this is going to finish up, right? It's going to finish up, even if some people have been in the meantime regularized with inverted commas with stamps on passports. It will finish up in the Supreme Court, which is what we're going to discuss now. So Joe Biden, I think, to give him some credit here, who's a man failing, heading to the twilight of his presidency, his stolen presidency, failing in his mental faculties, but he has found one way to seize the initiative and at least put Republicans on the defensive. And there's this plan with term limits, codes of conduct. Some of these things will require a constitutional amendment. Some of them may just require straightforward legislation. My first question to you is what I asked Mark Pellet this morning. A rolling 18 justices on the Supreme Court with a rolling two appointments by a president every 4 years, that will politicize the Supreme Court, right? It won't depoliticize it. It will increasingly politicize it. In fact, it will be in a permanent political modality, right? Because these nomination battles will be ongoing and continuing. Is that healthy for America's body politic? And is it what the founding fathers would have wanted?
Absolutely not. This is a radical assault on the Supreme Court and judicial independence by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They're trying to destroy the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is in their way. We have President Trump appointing 3 constitutionalist judges to the Supreme Court: Justice Gorsuch, my former boss, Justice Kavanaugh, and Justice Barrett. And you finally have a Supreme Court for the first time in 90 years that understands that it's job to interpret the laws, not to write the laws, and it's its job to protect everyday Americans, real Americans and real America from this colossal federal government, the government overreach. And we saw during this lawfare against President Trump, where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris tried to bankrupt Trump, they tried to throw Trump in prison for the rest of his life, and then they tried to just take him off the ballot. And the Supreme Court stepped in and correctly stopped this, right? And so what is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's response? Well, they created the environment where President Trump almost had his head blown off on national TV. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris said President Trump was an existential threat to democracy who needed to be stopped at all cost, a dictator who needed to be stopped at all cost. And then they said that they needed to put a bullseye on Trump's head. And then they underfunded Trump's Secret Service detail. They intentionally underfunded the detail. They intentionally denied requests from Trump's Secret Service detail to add more protection. And what did we have happen? We had an assassin almost blow off Trump's head on national TV on July 13th. And that didn't work. And so now what are Joe Biden and Kamala Harris doing? They're trying to destroy the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is in their way. It's the last line of defense that protects us from governmental overreach and tyranny. We saw a lot of that during COVID lockdowns, BLM, Antifa riots. We're going to see a lot of that with Hamas riots. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris hate the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is protecting our God-given rights to speak, to worship, to associate, to protect ourselves. And that's what I keep telling people. Everything is on the line on November 5th. Do you want President Trump replacing Justice Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito on the Supreme Court, or do you want President Kamala Harris replacing Justice Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito? Because if Kamala Harris does it, that's the end of our country. I mean, that is where the Supreme Court will say we do not have the right to speak, we do not have the right to associate, we do not have the right to worship, we don't have the right to protect ourselves. If you think the COVID lockdowns were bad, just wait until the left takes over the Supreme Court. They will destroy our country. And that is why this next election is so critical. And that's why Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are trying to destroy the legitimacy of the Supreme Court because they want to take away our God-given rights.
Mike, hold on one moment. I just have to read out a sponsor thing. When we come back to you in the closing minutes of the show, I'm going to ask you, it's my hobby horse. Whenever we discuss the Supreme Court, I always have this question. I'll ask you again. I've asked it you before. I think America needs a constitutional amendment to permanently limit the number of Supreme Court justices. It's not a panacea. It's not perfect. The Democrats will obviously try to change it. Perhaps even future Republicans will try to change it, but it will at least make it more difficult and remove the threat, the persistent threat of court packing. Hold on, Mike. We're back to you just 1 minute. Tax season is over, and for the IRS, that means collection season is on. They've got an army of agents targeting hard-working Americans like you. So if you owe back taxes, you need to know about Tax Network USA. Tax Network USA has brilliant strategies to resolve your IRS problems quickly and in your favor. Here's why you need Tax Network USA. They have preferred direct lines to the IRS. They know which agents to work with and which to avoid. They specialize in reducing or even eliminating your tax debt. They're tough negotiators that explore every possible solution to end your tax problem fast. They've resolved over $1 billion worth in tax debts for their clients. Some of these programs expire. You don't want to wait on this. Contact Tax Network USA today. Schedule your free consultation now. Call 1-800-245-6000. That's 1-800-245-6000. Or visit tnusa.com/Bannon. tnusa.com/Bannon. Mike Davis, in the last minute and a half of this show, please back me up on this. Do you think a constitutional amendment? Look, I think if the founding fathers had put this in the Constitution, you wouldn't have had any of the problems with FDR, with the New Deal, with the court packing, with the National Recovery Act. It wouldn't have been an issue. The vote wouldn't have even been there. Do you think after nearly 250 years now, do you think the time has arrived to have a constitutional amendment to limit the number of justices, perhaps to keep it at 9? And is that something that perhaps Donald Trump should take the initiative with and propose a constitutional amendment of his own to counter what Joe Biden has released this morning? Closing words of the show and the last minute to you, sir.
We've had 9 justices on the Supreme Court since 1869, more than 150 years ago, going back to right after the Civil War. We used to have a different number of justices. Sometimes it ranged from 6, sometimes it ranged from 10, but that was before we had the federal courts of appeals. These Supreme Court justices used to ride circuit. They used to get on their horses and ride around the country. And it was a much smaller country then, but they would ride around their country and ride circuit, take cases, hear appeals. Well, they don't do that anymore. So there are 9 justices for the last more than 150 years, nearly 150 years, and it needs to stay at 9 justices. And the fact that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are calling for court packing is because we have the first constitutionalist majority in 90 years. This is a red line. If they cross this, they will destroy our country.
So yes, a constitutional amendment, yes.
Yeah, I don't like constitutional amendments, but if we have to, we have to on this one because we need 9 justices.